Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is How Conscious is Too Conscious in Parenting. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, Bridgie, because you and I work with so many parents. It's so beautiful just to watch all of the different ways and possibilities and ways of being and belonging to the world and parenting and how you feel about motherhood and the raising of your children. Like, it's such a gift to watch all of the different possibilities, isn't it?
It is. And I mean, it feels like such a privilege to be able to work with women and parents and help them see wider in their own mothering experience, as well as have reverence for where they've come from, because so often on a conscious parenting path you can be, wanting to get things right or wanting to heal your past or really wanting to give your children this, beautiful, inspiring platform from which to blossom into the world. But sometimes we can get a little too conscious. And so that's where I wanted to take this conversation in this episode.
Beautiful. What do you mean by a little too conscious?
When I think of a little too conscious, I think edging into obsessing over there being a right way, or thinking, planning, rationalizing, strategizing, and not being present with your child. So you're almost with them but not with them, or you're observing your family more than you're experiencing your family. It is in a lot of judgment of other parents as well. So judging other people's way of raising children, as a way to make yourself right or okay.
Yeah.
And what I see is it can sometimes tip into permissive parenting. So we desire so much to give our children this really whole experience of who they are, but in doing so can sometimes not give them the boundaries or the governance that they actually need to grow. And that is either a conscious choice by us to give them freedom, or an unconscious moving away from pain, so we won't set the boundary or we won't put in the control or the structure because that feels too much like how we were parented. So we try to move in the opposite direction. So that is what I'm thinking of when I say too conscious. That there's this, and then also what it can also play out in relationship dynamics. So it can mean difficulty being intimate or connected to your partner because you're instead judging all the ways that they're not doing things right or that they need to be better. And so as long as we're projecting onto them, we're not in our hearts, and that we're therefore in disconnect with them, which inadvertently creates, you know, other problems for the family dynamic and for our children often too. So yeah, I just wanted to bring to light some of how I see that play out. I can see you nodding away, so I'd love to hear like what kind of view.
I just really loved it, especially that. Well, yeah, I mean, I loved everything you said. That's why I wrote it down, because otherwise it, you know, evades my mind. So what I wrote down about what I loved then was that concept of observing your family and strategizing what happens next, and then, and you can find yourself doing that across an entire day. So you haven't ever really been there, because you're always actually living, like, you as the soul, the energy, the spirit is living ahead in time.
Yeah.
And the body or the vessel might be here, but you're not. And I could so see that part of me that thought that was the way to undo the harm that I perceived had been done to me.
Yeah.
Was by being, you know, 2 to 4 steps ahead of everyone, meant that I would never end up at that point where the beast would erupt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can see the genius in strategy, and we don't create strategy for no reason. Like, if you find yourself doing that, that's a trauma response. The inability to be here because you don't know what's going to happen, and there's so much fear that the perception is I mitigate that with the sense of more control, which of course isn't true, because you're equally as out of control in that process.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can completely see the trauma response in that. So if you find yourself there, as I have and do and will continue to, because, you know, if you've lived a life where you've experienced trauma, and I would dare say that all of us have, it's just in different forms and elicited in different responsive moments. I don't think there's anyone that's without trauma. It just is that it'll be a different form, different area of life, will manifest under different conditions. But if you see yourself doing that, jumping out of your body and ahead in time, so that you can strategize and put in place the things so that way back here, this thing doesn't happen, or you don't end up there. Because if you do end up there, you're shit scared. You might go, well, I can't end up there because I won't cope, because shit's going to get nasty, because it'll send me over the edge. Okay, but under all of that is fear, and under all of that is trauma, and you've strategized because you've had to in the past. That's what's kept you safe. So I have just the most enormous sense of compassion. And at the same time, as I can remember myself there as a conscious parent in building my conscious parenting journey, without a framework for that, you know, without a blueprint, I should say, from my own childhood. So, you know, probably as many like you and I potentially who are trying to create it from scratch. Like, we don't have the blueprints, and we're kind of out there forging a path on our own. And I can see myself doing that strategy because it's too hard to be here. I don't know how I'm going to handle that emotion when it arises, if it arises. So best not to. That's trauma. And then at the same time, though, I can feel into that sense of pride or arrogance, or self-righteousness that comes with that, or it certainly did for me. This sense of, well, that's what it is to be a good mother. That's what you do. You do these things, and there's a level of self-sacrifice involved in that too, right? We perceive that it's a lesser pain, but the truth is it's not, because you're not living in your body. Your mind is probably going crazy as you're strategizing into the future and all of the different sliding doors moments, and then creating. It's not a lesser pain. But I can also see how there was a level of, well, that's what you do. Like, motherhood is hard.
Yeah.
And if it's shit easy and you just don't give two shits, then you're not a good mum, because it's too easy.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And if you were a good mum, then all of a sudden that calls into question all of the effort and sacrifice that I've given. So we can't both coexist. So you can't be good enough.
Right. Yeah, right. I can completely, though I didn't know that at the time, like this is all in hindsight and retrospectively being able to dismantle and see wider.
Yeah, but I also think if you have it as a value, it's still going to continue to come up. It's going to continue to come up, that whole thing of how much is what's going on with my child about my child and how much is it is about my own experience of parenting them and my story.
Oh, 100%.
That I think happens almost on the daily in mothering.
So much. Oh my gosh, that like lights my heart on fire, that statement, because I'm like, that has been my greatest learning is that what I thought was conscious parenting was me making everything about me.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? Which is in essence the opposite of what I thought I was doing. Irony.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it just kind of, I have such heart compassion for me back then though, because there's no way I would be the mum I am now without all of that.
Totally. And you know, I also really love it because in many ways, if that's what lights us up, that is powerful for our kids because they see that, you know, us lit up. Yeah, even if you know, it is in this maybe perhaps false sense of control or guiding them to some better
or righteousness.
Yeah.
Righteousness, I don't know.
Righteousness.
Wrongiousness and righteousness. So I loved that statement because I can completely touch in to the part of me that thought I was doing this present gentle parenting, but actually I wasn't really there. And in fact, actually, a memory just popped into my head then. It's my husband's 50th in December. So I've been gathering all of like a timeline of photos across his life to, you know, make a slideshow. And I was going through the photos of, or the era of life that was us becoming parents for the first time and then the second time. And like him and I were like welling up in tears. Like it's such a gift just to go through old photos.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
We were like welling up in tears. And I was like, I don't think I was even there.
Oh.
You know, like I can even feel that now. Yeah. And he was like, I think you're judging yourself because you were 110% there. And I'm like, was I?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I might have looked like it. I looked like the granola, fully self-sacrificing, 100% my kids' needs before anything and anyone else in the whole world. 100% I looked like it.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure I was there.
Because you're almost that was a manifestation of your own anxiety.
Trauma.
Trauma. So that if you're in that, then you're constantly in the future and never actually in the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was looking back on these photos and I was like, oh my God, they were so precious. And yet all I can remember thinking and feeling was how fucking hard they were.
Yeah.
Whereas I had the experience of 3 and 4 that were completely present. Like I know that feeling is different. Like I look back on the photos of 3 and 4 and I don't have that
feeling. Yeah.
That unresolved tears wanting to come from my body. It's not there because I was there. I don't have stuck stuff for baby 3 and 4.
Yeah.
But I've got stuck stuff for baby 1 and 2 because I wasn't really there.
Yeah. So much compassion for that. Gosh.
Yeah. So like I just so get it. And actually it's when I think I'm so fucking grateful that we had 3 and 4 because I actually know what it's like to really be present and love the shit out of motherhood and let go all of the things of it having to be hard and self-sacrificing and look this one way, because my experience of 3 and 4, I would say, is more conscious and far less hard work.
It's almost, in some ways, more, the irony being that it's more conscious in the unconsciousness.
Right.
Because you're actually giving permission for more wholeness.
Yeah.
Rather than this narrow experience of like how I need to be for them.
Yeah.
Or how I need to speak to them, or, just this kind of tightrope.
Yeah.
That is often externally like created, right? Like, so you're looking for all of the perfect, like, every single ingredient that you've referenced outside of you that must mean that you do things right, so that you get just the perfect balance of just the perfect person who's got all the right things that this child needs, instead of actually showing up as you.
Exactly. Exactly. And actually, now I look back, baby 1 and 2 sucked their thumb too.
Ah, did they?
Yeah, but 3 and 4 didn't.
How interesting.
And at the time, I couldn't work it out. I'm like, I'm so present. I'm so conscious. Like, fuck the control patterns. I can't, like, I meet every emotion.
Yeah.
But did I? Because was I there?
Yeah, so you might have, and then this is like, you and I have had this conversation too before about like, the books and how to do this kind of parenting, but they speak very little about the woman in that.
Yeah.
And how much you can embody yourself.
Yeah.
Because, I can see it, like with my toddler. If I'm not with her present, she's off the Richter, like she can just, like, I can just see, like, even like it's been a big couple of days in Victoria, like with newer, road maps and stuff. And like, the family energy between my husband and I after reading it was, like really kind of like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah.
And I was just laughing to myself, because where I wasn't moving the emotion of it, she was. And where I wasn't being totally present with my experience of it, she was pulling me into it. And so much of parenting invites us into the surrender of that moment. But that if we're not in our body, they amp it up more. So, the thumb sucking will have just been some kind of expression of your own repression.
Yeah, which was super painful, super painful.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm showing up with everything I've got to the point of exhaustion.
Yeah.
But it's not about doing more.
Yeah.
And I thought it was. Like, if I just spent more hours rather than the half an hour where I might have a cup of tea on my own. Well, if I gave up that half an hour, then maybe they wouldn't suck their thumb.
Yeah, gosh. And it's just that's never enough then. Like, if it's constantly about doing more.
Right.
Then it's the road to burnout and depletion and resentment and frustration, but you never actually get there anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that was point number 1. Point number 2 on judging other parents to make yourself right. I mean, you and I have cycled over this conversation so
many times. Yeah.
So we'll just briefly skim over it this time, but amen. Yeah, I absolutely found and only put around me those people that were tolerable to my nervous system, because they agreed with everything that I agreed with and saw the world exactly as I saw the world. And anyone who didn't was so jarring to me, toxic people that I could just not be around or get out of my whatever, or get so busy with my kids I didn't have to be around them. So, definitely created an entire narrative of them and us, which honestly I had done. I actually think I was acculturated into that too, because my dad was so alternative. There'd always been a them and an us.
Yeah. So that was quite a safe pattern.
Yeah. There was the mainstream.
Yes.
The sheeple.
Yeah.
And then there was us.
God, how many families are growing up with that narrative now? How many children are being raised in that narrative now?
I just see it as so detrimental.
Yeah.
Because it's the opposite of spiritual and consciousness, which is always trying to come back to oneness.
It is so true. Isn't that, the great cosmic joke of like conscious living is that you actually just end up otherizing the representation of every part of yourself you cannot accept.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was deeply painful and isolating and armoring, because I had to fight the fight whenever I wasn't in those, in inverted commas, safe communities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I had to hide pieces of myself, which is like, oh my God, I mean, the ripples that has across the world as soon as you start segmenting who you are.
It's so exhausting as well.
And no wonder you can't have connected relationships with other people, because you're not showing up as a whole self. You're only showing up as a fraction. So you're not trustable. Why would someone want to enmesh and entangle with you when they don't know who you are? Because people can tell when you're pulling back and hiding pieces of you. Of course, again, we're always trusting someone else's trustability.
Yeah.
How much can I trust you based on how much
I feel you
see? Yeah. Yeah. So I actually see that as like isolation and being the outsider is one of my most painful memories across my entire childhood and adolescence. But where do you think that comes from? Otherizing.
Yeah.
So it was the healing of that wound, which I know I've spoken about also many times on this podcast, coming into a mainstream school, which also was led by my eldest son. And that was deeply, deeply painful for me to leave the Steiner community.
Yeah.
And walk the walk of trusting my child, which is what I'd always said I would do. That was really hard for me to do that. That was like a rite of passage for me, even though it had nothing to do with me.
That's the thing, isn't it? Like it's how much can I also see my child versus the projection that I have on who I think they are or need to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was coming into the mainstream community and actually being called to dismantle all of the belief systems I had about who they were. Because what I saw was women who were just as flawed and open and actually more open-hearted and welcoming than the spaces that I had come from.
Yeah. Wow.
Because they didn't hold the same judgments. They weren't trying to justify anything. They were just there.
In like their wholeness.
Yeah.
You probably hadn't learned all the things you'd learned.
No, that's right.
Which things to hold back a bit.
Which created separation.
Yeah.
So actually getting to know and immersing myself in, because community has been, still is, it just morphs form, a super high value of mine. So especially coming from this, what I perceive to be a super integrated, like, Steiner natural parenting based community. And I kind of felt like the, sore thumb or whatever that saying is, plonked into this alien world of mainstreamers, we'll call them. I couldn't let go of my value in community. So I inserted myself into committees and community sport. And because I was like, I have to have community.
Yeah.
I can't do this without community. Like I know women will save my life 1,000 times. And I know that me putting community around my children saves them.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So the value on my children having someone outside of me forced me to move beyond my own barriers. And what I dismantled was the them. Like, fuck me, those women still have my back in the most profound and extraordinary ways. And I've never had to hide a piece of who I am from them.
So powerful.
Like fucking beautiful. We're just interrupting this podcast on how conscious is too conscious in parenting to let you know what is going on in the world that you can jump into. So, Bridgie, what can we jump into?
Coming up is Disrupt, Revealing the Mother Wound, which is a beautiful 5-week program with me, which is all about so much of what we're talking about in this podcast, which is unraveling your mother imprint and your story and how you can stand in that in power and reverence for both yourself and your child. It's going to be a really empowering space to be. Find that at bridgetwood.life.
And if you would love to dive a little bit deeper with my work, then I would highly recommend you jump online, and wherever you get your online books from, you grab a copy of my book, Flowers and Honey, The Art of Relationship, Love and Desire. You can find out more at julietenner.love. So judging other parents is just all of the ways that we're judging ourselves. You cannot judge another person unless you're judging that within yourself.
Yeah.
You can't feel judgment from another unless you feel that judgment within you. Mm. So I completely felt that point. Permissive parenting. Yeah, I can see where boundaries are really hard. I would move beyond my boundaries in order to meet my child's needs.
Mm. And the interesting thing about that is that, you know, often that's then when we lash out in anger because we didn't listen to ourselves, and then berate ourselves for our unconsciousness or harmful anger that our child then has to experience, which can then just become a cycle of guilt and shame instead of going, okay, what did that moment need that I wasn't willing to give it? And like, what's my piece there? What's the pain there for me about no?
Yeah. Yeah.
And all the ways that no, I see that no harmed me, maybe.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, true too. And maybe not sure if you're worthy of this time, or if that's okay for you to take this time, or that your children might feel abandoned if you take this time. Yeah, so many narratives around that. Yeah, or not, like you have that story of, I've been brought up to be the people pleaser and I'm trained into appeasing.
Yes. Yeah, that's a big one for women.
Yeah. Self-sacrifice.
Appeasing, keeping the peace, making sure everybody else is okay before your empowerment is allowed.
Yeah, but that's just a way of getting that inner child met where I need to still receive love. Because I'm pretty sure if I chose me, I wouldn't receive any love. Yeah. So I'll give up the pieces of me so that I can still receive connection and love. That's a child parenting a child.
Yeah.
So we have to look at the trauma wounds that we're holding. I'm not sure how we can build new parenting frameworks unless we're really willing to meet the trauma that has existed and the conditioning that has been created.
No, because otherwise it just keeps going.
Yeah, you can't just like do conscious parenting.
I know, and it's such a misconception that it's a set of phrases, or it's a once you just choose this way of being, it's just who you are. And what you practice, it is a constant unraveling of your own story.
Yeah, exactly.
It's ultimately freeing. But in the mess of it, it's like, oh God. Like, I even had a conversation with my brother yesterday, and I was like, do you remember like much conflict in our house, like when we were growing up?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah. And he's like, no. It's like as if mum would allow that. He's like, look at her now. Like if you and I have an argument, she has to walk out of the room. And so we both have this like sense, like my nervous system has almost got this sense that like fighting and like, like tension is not safe.
Yeah.
So we'll brush it away, like push it away and pretend it's not there in order to be accepted, in order to make sure everything's okay. And so it's a constant work for me with and I said to my husband like last night, I was like, it's constant work for me to allow our children to fight and to trust like the part of me that has to waver around when I intervene and when I allow them to have their experience of arguing. And when I can feel it becoming too much in my nervous system, I have to work that edge constantly around the sensory, intensity of that. Not to let them hurt each other, but to actually just allow the disagreement.
Allow conflict to exist.
Allow conflict and to see conflict as part of healthy relationships. Because so much of I even see it with my thumbs up, like a reflex it's like a, well, fuck you then. Like if I feel like there's too much conflict with my husband, or if we're having an argument, I immediately go, it's immediate, like, well, you know, like self-protection, armor up, like, and it's just my pattern.
Yeah, totes. How much less divisive would this entire world be if we were actually able to stay connected to our heart in conflict?
Yes. Yeah. So much.
It wouldn't be the them and me.
There wouldn't be. But the way that we learn to do that is by putting ourselves next to and alongside everything that we otherize.
Yeah, so this is why you don't get rid of toxic people, right?
No, you don't. And you also recognize the perfection of your family. Like after my conversation with my brother yesterday, we have wildly different views on things. You know, and I am so grateful for that. Because it's exactly how it should be. In families, because in families you have a conservation of opposites. In families, you will have the messy one, the clean one, the pro, the anti. Like you just have everything, because it's designed for us to become whole. And the best way to become whole is to be forced to love the very things that are your blood. And the more you disown them, the more you disown all those parts of yourself. And so actually being around family is your greatest pathway to growth, because you are forced to wrestle with, struggle with, and ultimately love the parts that you say are not you. And that is a gift. But what we tend to do, particularly in this climate, is we'll, you know, and create new families of echo chambers who think like us. When in fact, the family that you come from is teaching you. It's teaching you where you cut off, where you are polarized, where you don't accept others. You know, it's teaching us so much. And so that has been a most beautiful gift, to love in the face of such difference, and to learn to work that edge within myself.
Well, to learn, I imagine, also to hold yourself.
Yeah.
With integrity, sovereignty, but groundedness.
Yeah.
So you're not hustling for your worth, fighting for your opinion to win.
Yeah.
It's just like, we're different. I can love me without needing to to inflate it, to puff it up, or to minimize myself and crush it down. I can just love me here, and I can love you there without needing to put you up or down either.
Or without needing to like come up with all the reasons why I'm right.
Yeah, and to put them down.
Yeah, exactly. And to, I mean, like the work is like you notice that rise in you, and you go, oh, hey there, piece of me that wants to be right here. You know, and you notice that other part that, like, you know, wants them to, you know, just shut up because they're wrong, and you go, oh, here we go, this is that other part, and you just get an
shut up because you're wrong. Oh man, we've all been there.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is being human, right?
Human, sorry.
But this is this, you know, like the greatest struggle in being human is the tussle between our animal self and our high mind. You know, that animal nature that like wants to devour the opposite and wants to just win, and the higher mind that can go, well, actually, both of these can exist. And so when we can know what those little red flags are for us, we can bring mastery, because we can go, I know this. I'm gonna put myself in that ring and see how much I can govern myself, as opposed to, you know, the relationship breaking down or creating massive conflict in my family because I'm so self-righteous, right? And instead go, this is functional. And then you then get to choose where you play. You get to have your views, your beliefs, your life, your way of being, without needing to make a single other person in the world need to do, say, or be that either. That's powerful.
Yeah, it really is. Do you think there's a time at which you cut ties from family or people that are too vexatious?
Yeah, I think that there is definitely, but I don't think that you do that without also owning your part in it, in the co-creation of whatever dynamic that looks like. Because when the pain is so big, we want so much to get away from that pain and to have those people out of our lives. But if we don't feel into the rawness of that and what it's teaching us about ourselves, then it's just going to change into a different form. We'll end up in a job where that conflict arises. We'll end up in a new relationship where that exists because we don't get to avoid the lessons.
Yeah. Or in our own children.
Or in our children, which are the most powerful ones for us to have to face it with, because
you can't escape you. The toxicness doesn't disappear from your life.
No. And it's even like, you know, I think about like how many of us are like, you know, just yearning for a holiday right now. But same thing, like a holiday, you don't get to leave yourself. Like wherever you go, there you are. So whatever like family dynamic you've got that you've been trying to escape from, that you think a holiday is going to make better, you're still going to meet that just in the holiday. Yes, it'll be amazing because you're getting different experiences, different inputs, different, you know, ways of seeing the world, but there's no escaping you.
Yeah. And actually, I kind of think of it as, where would you rather those shadow parts exist? Because you kind of have a level of governance over that. Can I go, this is really purposeful to me to keep my shadow in my mom and my sister, my mother-in-law, my, who knows, brother?
Yeah.
Is this really purposeful for me to be with the hard parts in those people in my life? Or I shut the door on them. Is it more purposeful for me to be with that shadow in my children, in my relationship and my partner, in my workplace? Where would I rather the pain existed?
Yes, because there's no getting rid of the pain.
There's no getting rid of it, but you do have a co-creation about where it appears.
Where it goes. And it's that whole thing, you know, if you don't have an enemy outside of you, you will be your own enemy.
Yeah, totes.
So how can you love the conflict outside of you?
Yeah. So powerful.
Love, you know, even the times we're in of great upheaval and, you know, division, like, you know, where you're feeling cornered or where you're feeling controlled, well, then, okay, there's got to be an opposite. So where are you feeling free? Where are you feeling sovereign? Where are you feeling you have choice?
And is that really meaningful to your life? Yeah, totes. I mean, it just humbles you, doesn't it, when you see that?
Yeah.
My gosh.
And it stops the stories we tell ourselves. You know, it stops the, you know, obsessive overthinking about how things are, which is not true anyway. It offers us a pattern interrupt. And an opportunity to choose our next step.
Yeah. Yeah, I really feel that one. So I think that probably speaks to our next point, actually, which was providing the governance to grow. I think that's what we've just spoken about. Would you add anything onto that? Or providing the governance to our children, perhaps, was the lens you were speaking with it at the beginning, and we've moved into the governance of self.
Yeah.
But do you want to add in the layer of
the governance for children?
For children?
Yeah. So what I love to remind a lot of parents of is, you know, who have that really child-led inclination, is that it was Marie Montessori who so much of that thinking has come from, in terms of at least educational settings and learning. And so people pick up her quote, which is, you know, follow the child, but they forget the second half of the quote, which is follow the child as their leader. So sometimes as a leader, we're going to lead them to discomfort. We're going to lead them to difficulty, right? And where we don't want to, how is that reflective of where we don't want to lead ourselves to that? Because if I'm struggling with something in me, chances are that's going to be mirrored around me. And do I really want to cut them off from that opportunity to grow? I don't. Because they can. And I can. It's just moving past the parts that feel like we can't.
It's so true.
And so I think I see it a lot with, many parents who, attachment parent, and they struggle a lot with weaning, for example. And I just have so much compassion, because that was certainly my experience with my first child. It took so much within me to build the certainty that he'd be okay and I'd be okay, and it was, the right thing for us both. But so often we can look to our child's readiness, like, oh gosh, are they really, or they still want it, or we find all the reasons why toddlers should be able to feed through the night, without thinking about and giving any spaciousness to or reverence for what we really need right now.
Mm.
Because we have been cultured to minimize ourselves and our mothering and give everything to everybody else. And then maybe if they're okay for 5 minutes, then we'll get what's left. Or we get so pissed because we haven't had boundaries, and so pissed because we haven't looked in the mirror that our children are offering us, that we go, well, fuck you, I'm out. I'm going out for the night. You deal. Mm. Which isn't actually that healthy either.
Mm.
There's a place in the middle that says, what does my child need right now? Mm. What do I really need right now? How can I see this point of contention between the two of those needs and find a way forward that is honoring of us both? Mm. So my body right now is saying that I don't want to feed in the night anymore. I'm really tired. I want to go to sleep. And that be just as valuable and important as my child's desire for more milk. Mm. And that child is learning an important lesson about body autonomy, about respecting somebody else's needs and their own, as well as their own. Mm. And they are all deeply important lessons. Mm. So it's that coming back to, what do you really want as a mother? And can you let yourself have that?
Yeah, and stepping into that role of leadership, because we're all leaders.
Yeah.
But depending on how you feel about leadership will probably depend on how easeful that step is for you. Mm. But for kids' nervous systems, it's way better to know someone's on, driving this car.
Yeah.
Someone's captaining this ship. It doesn't have to be me.
Yeah.
Because I had to do that because I was the parentified child, because my mum did not have the ship, which meant I had to have the ship.
Yeah.
Because someone in that family dynamic will have the ship. Mm. Someone will step into that role. So is it going to be you, which I perceive to be the best development for your child, is to know they don't have to adult up too quickly. They don't have to move into the areas of anxiety because, is someone leading this? I don't even know. Is there an end to this? I don't even know. Is there a boundary? I don't even know. If I hit a boundary, it's going to come out of side swipes like, I'm out, this is it, because I didn't know there was a boundary there to begin with, and now I've got anxiety and trauma because we got to that point, and there's always a tiger coming to get me.
Yeah.
That's what happens when there's no one captaining the ship.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the rules of engagement, aka boundaries, are here.
Mm. It's such a great explanation, because it's so true. And we can sometimes think, oh, but my children just want freedom to be. And then sometimes we think that gives us freedom to be, but actually there's a level of anxiety in them if they don't feel like,
totally,
this is coming after this, which is coming after this, and we're all going to move in this direction. And yes, some people are going to be annoyed about that, and I can accept that you're going to be annoyed, but this is where we're going.
Yeah. Yeah. Because boundaries let people love you better. Mm. If you don't tell me what your boundaries are, you're not a safe person, and I don't know how to love you.
Yeah.
And therefore, that's my imprint.
Mm. So when you say that, because I think I need to hear that again because I love that so much. Boundaries let people love
you better. Mm. Because if I can say to my kids, here's how I love to be touched, and here's how I love to engage with you, and here's what opens my heart and keeps us in connection, and here's the thing that things that fracture and damage that. Here's what we do when we get to the fracture and damage. Here's the restorative process. This is boom, what it looks like. And every time we move through these predictable set of steps, it's not a problem that we fuck it up. Yeah. Because here's what happens consistently.
When it happens, yeah.
But there's no tiger coming to get you, because we all know when we get here, here's what happens. But in that process, you're learning how to love me and meet me in that place, which is what we're always trying to do. How do we love the other better? How do we love in a way that's a gifting towards the other that makes them better? If you're not in relationships that make you better, what are you doing in them? Same thing goes with our children.
Yes.
I'm here to be in relationship that makes them better. And so are they with me.
Such a great breakdown. I love that. Because it's such a call to rise.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of the icky places that we get it wrong, and same with me. And as my kids develop and learn, their boundaries shift and change. So it's not my job to guess their boundaries. And it's not my job to be punished by my teenagers when I get it wrong, or to just not enter it because I'm not sure if I'm going to get it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which alters our connection.
Yeah.
It's their job to go, here's how I need to be loved right now. And I go, cool. It's great for me to know that, because I can love you really well there and we can stay in connection. Boundaries are not a problem.
Boundaries are only a problem if we feel that we're going to lose ourselves because of that boundary, because we've attached so much to that way of experiencing life with that person, or ourself in relationship to that person. That's when boundaries can trigger, like the abandonment wound, which in codependent families where there wasn't a lot of boundaries, that can be big.
Totally.
And so part of the building of the boundaries that you're talking about is, how do I start with small ones?
Yeah.
And how do I both set them and be okay setting them? And how do I practice being on the receiving end and not closing?
Yeah.
And family teaches us that, whether it's our intimate relationship, whether it's our siblings or our parents, or our children.
It's like it almost brings us full circle back to what you were saying, is how do I hold myself in conflict?
Yeah.
Because when I meet that place, how do I hold myself there? Do I collapse inwardly on shame? I'm so wrong. Do I collapse inwardly on myself because of guilt? I've done something really wrong.
Yeah.
Because neither of those scenarios are meeting the other person.
And ultimately, if there is, I mean, for most of us, if there's any kind of trauma around conflict, which pretty much most humans have.
Right. I mean, this is why we're trying to be compassionate about humanity, right?
We will either be, it'll be a fight, flight, or it'll be a fawn response.
Yeah.
So getting curious for you about what it is. And sometimes there'll be different, like, so fawn is like apathy, okay, like you just kind of, it's just, you're just kind of going with the flow. And then we all know what fight is, and we all know what flight is, and we will play,
totally. Hello, trauma.
Yeah. And
this is why we need support around us, because it is like so hard to do this if you're only relying on yourself.
So much so. Because
you can't see the wood for the trees. You are the wood and the trees.
You are the wood. Exactly. Like you and I, the amount of conversations that you and I have about, like, we can see patterns in like so many of the women that we work with, and we talk about, like, unveiling them and like working through them. But, like, for fuck's sake, seeing your own.
I know. Can't see my own.
Because your own is part of your shadow, and you're not supposed to see it.
That's 100% true. That's why you need community and support to do this. Like, it's not supposed to be done on your own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, really, it's not. So before we wrap up, the last one, and I know we don't want to spend too much time on it because it's school holidays and you and I are both getting back to children. We've all been going for a really long time. But the last one was that the projection of the partner needs to be better. So you're not actually in your heart loving them. Like that one just like drilled in so hard into my heart when you said it.
Yeah. It's so big, isn't it?
Yeah. You put the other person in the pit and yourself on the pedestal and you cannot love from there.
No. You can't, because at that moment it's conditional.
Yeah.
And the truth of love is no conditions.
Yeah.
So,
and what is the impact, right? Because you're choosing health. We're so conscious. But are we? Because there's an impact of that dynamic on your children's imprint, on the family dynamic, on the health of the family and the individuals within that. Like, what is health and what is consciousness if we're only looking at it through a single lens?
Yeah. If there's no room for nuance, then it's not it at all.
Yeah.
Which is really humbling.
Super humbling. Which is the place you can love from.
Yeah.
When we're all flawed but equal, and that's okay.
Yeah. Gosh, yes. So if you are a mum who would really love to delve a little deeper into some of your own patterns and how to kind of exist and live and thrive beyond those, to unravel your mother's story and some of those wounding places, and I really would love to invite you into Disrupt, Revealing the Mother Wound. We begin on the 18th of October, and it is a 5-week program. And it also includes a beautiful, nourishing women's circle as part of it to really healing the community that we're talking about here. And through the ways and means that you and I both know have the power to just transform women's lives. So that's really what I want for those joining me in that space.
Oh, I want that for those women too. It's really powerful work to do. How could you possibly do anything on parenting unless you're looking at your mother wound? I don't know how you can.
I don't think you can. I actually think it's impossible.
Yeah. So,
and then also we get new layers all the time, right? Like we're taken into deeper and deeper initiations.
Totes.
And I have great reverence for that.
Yeah, me too. Because it's okay to be human.
Yeah.
To be conscious isn't to be somehow rise above your humanness.
No, that's right.
It's actually just to embrace it and live in it.
So to connect with you, Jules,
is julietenner.love, and to connect with you, Bridge,
it's bridgetwood.life. Remember to nourish the woman, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.